Hello, everybody, to the session on child speech and cleft lip and palate. My name is Dr. Silke Fricke, and I will be chairing this session. I will start with some housekeeping, even if probably some of you have seen that a few times already by now. First of all, the session actually, even if it wasn't planned like this, the session will have a live Q&A at the end. And that is because Sam Burr, unfortunately, for unforeseen reasons, can't be with us today. So we will have two speakers in this session, and then we will have a live Q&A at the end. So please post your question in the question tab on the right-hand side, and questions will then be asked verbally by me to the speakers in the Q&A time. So please use the chat function on the right-hand side to share comments and feedbacks. And the Q&A as well as the chat box are being monitored. So please be kind and respectful sharing your comments. As information for everybody, all the sessions are recorded, and recordings will be available in the video section of the platform after the live event has taken place, and it will be remaining there for 6 months after the conference. Please don't forget to leave feedback for the speakers and also for the event organizers in the feedback tab after each session. This is not only valuable for future event planning, but it will also earn you points, as you might know by now. And at the end of the session, there will also again appear a secret code on the screen. You can make a note of this and then head over to the challenge hub and hit enter the code on the landing page to kind of move yourself up the leaderboard. But for now, I will just hand over to our first speaker, or better to say, I'll stop sharing this first, and then I will hand over to our first speaker, Maria Kearney. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much. So hopefully my screen is sharing right now. Let me know if there are any issues. Yes, I think you're seeing that. Brilliant. So thank you very much for coming to the session. I'm going to talk to you about the results of the feasibility trial that we ran between 2021 and 2024 called Sonospeech Cleft Pilot, where we tested the feasibility of using ultrasound speech therapy compared to treatment as usual. And the PI of this project is Joanne Cleland. Co-Is were the treating clinicians, Lisa Crampin and Lisa Campbell, who are cleft specialists. And I was a research associate on this project. So I'm here to share our results. And the project was funded by the chief scientist of Scotland. So a little bit of background. Ultrasound biofeedback speech therapy is a type of speech therapy where the user, the children, for example, going through speech therapy, can see an image of their tongue on a screen, and they can see their tongue moving on the screen as they're speaking and producing articulations. And the setup is as in the pictures that you can see on the right. The ultrasound probe is held under the chin of the child, and they can see on the screen how their tongue is moving. The screen may contain some reference images showing them thumbs up or thumbs down, whether their tongue is moving towards the target place. This type of speech therapy has shown potential to be useful to children with speech sound disorders in a systematic review. And unfortunately, it seems to have been underexplored for children with cleft lip and palate, even though they do have, this population has experience with electropalatography, which is also another type of biofeedback, which has been shown to be helpful in the past, even if logistically a bit more difficult. There have been a few case series studies showing promising results of using speech therapy for children with cleft. However, we need robust studies to find out whether ultrasound is really effective with this population and how it compares really to the treatment that children already receive anyway. So here on the screen, you can scan a QR code to find out different studies, different papers that we've published based on this study. You can find our protocol, quantitative and qualitative results. And we have a bonus paper where we interviewed cleft specialist clinicians about their perspectives about the use of ultrasound speech therapy in a clinic. So I will be putting these QR codes again if you didn't manage to scan them right now. So for the study that we ended up running, the pilot feasibility, a randomized control trial, we aim to establish whether this kind of randomized control trial would be feasible and whether it would be acceptable to both the children and their families, and how they would cope within this trial, which is why our aims were really focused around the feasibility aspect as well. So we aim to achieve 75% threshold for each of the outcomes that you're seeing on the screen. So we want to achieve 75% of our recruitment target and 75% of retaining those recruited participants. We want to make sure that the measures that we have set up that need to be completed are completed at a minimum rate of 75%, both at baseline and then 1 week and 1 month follow-ups. And we also wanted to make sure that it's feasible for the clinicians to measure the within therapy session outcome measures as well. So that included the dose, and also audio recordings of the target word list that the children had to produce. And we also wanted to make sure that the clinicians are capable of adhering to the protocol, and that is realistic for them. And for this study, the protocol was that they need to achieve 100 constant repetitions within each session as a minimum. The design of this randomized control trial was to randomly allocate children to either the ultrasound visual biofeedback speech therapy treatment or articulation therapy. On the screen, you can also access the paper using the QR code. So for the baseline assessment, we had, which was actually me, I measured the children's vocabulary using the BPVS, their stimulability and consonant inventory and PCC using the DEEP, their intelligibility using the ICS, and their quality of life using the Cleft Q. And specifically for our primary outcome measure, we measured their percentage consonant correct on the specific target word lists for the consonants that they found difficult. Then the children went on to have 6 therapy sessions, one over 6 weeks, 1 per week over 6 weeks. And during that time, we measured their audio of producing the target word lists at the start of each session as a probe. And we also tallied the dosage that they received. The SOTs recorded that. And 1 week after their therapy ended, we measured again their intelligibility, quality of life, and target word production, and same at 1 month follow-up when we also measured the parents' experience of service. Our statistics were quite straightforward. We measured descriptively the percentages of completion rates, and whether I was measuring agreement of my tallying of the dosage of within therapy session dosage achieved compared to the SOTs, I used interclass correlation coefficient to see how we agreed. And the more exciting part really is to talk about the results. So as a summary, we achieved all of our targets except our recruitment target. So we managed to achieve 59% recruitment of our recruitment target. It was straight out of COVID, so 2022, 23, when we were mostly recruiting. And at that point, families who had experienced all kinds of challenges during COVID were still coming out of that and coping with that, which is why I think we had some challenges convincing families that it's a priority for them. We didn't really try to convince them too much, but families tended to have other priorities and didn't necessarily want to participate in a research study at that point. But those who participated were mostly retained for the duration of the whole study. So we had 8 children who ended up being randomized to the articulation group, which is treatment as usual, and 11 children who ended up being randomized to the ultrasound group. And almost all children stayed until the end. One child was withdrawn by the treating clinicians because they had concerns about their well-being that were unrelated to the trial. So yeah, so in terms of the feasibility of achieving all of the outcome measures and completing them, both at baseline and then at the 2 follow-up stages, we achieved all of our targets as well. So the minimum of 75% completion was achieved. And for many of the targets, this was also way higher. So there weren't really any issues to collect that data from families. And I think part of that is because for the baseline and follow-up measures, they were coming to the University of Strathclyde to me. So I was there to support them to make sure that all of the questionnaires are completed. And I think that helped. In terms of the feasibility of within therapy measure completion, Lisa and Lindsay, who are the treating speech therapists, they have a lot of experience and they didn't struggle at all. So as you can see, they completed a minimum of 75% of all of the recordings that they had to complete, all of the baseline recordings with the children, which were then used to calculate percentage consonants correct for those therapy sessions. So as you can see for the different therapy sessions, those were achieved at a quite high rate. In addition to that, the treating clinicians also had to tally how many times the child is producing the target consonant in practice for the therapy session. And the treating clinicians, again, had no problem achieving the minimum dose of 100 repetitions. And in fact, in almost all cases, they surpassed it by quite a lot. You can see the averages of how many times children completed the target consonant for each session on the screen. So achieving 100 trials wasn't really a challenge. So hopefully that is good news to those people who are interested in increasing their dosage per session. It can be very feasible to be done. And in fact, there was high agreement rate between how when I was listening back to their sessions and doing the tallies, we ended up having this high agreement with the treating clinicians. And where there were differences, there were usually the clinicians underestimating how many times they've managed to elicit the target repetition compared to how many times the child actually managed to produce it. So it all worked out here. So in terms of the quantitative summary, we achieved all of our aims. So we would deem the trial feasible. Participants tended to stay until the end, and we think that coming to campus to complete questionnaires also supported families to complete those. And we think future recruitment challenges will probably be better because we're further away from COVID, but also we need to contact more families from the very beginning of the trial and involve more Cleft centers. So now I'm going to speak about the qualitative results because there were also some aims that had to be assessed qualitatively. So we wanted to see if randomization is acceptable to children and families, and we wanted to see if ultrasound is an acceptable intervention and assessment tool. So parents completed 2 questionnaires about acceptability of ultrasound and randomization. And we also ran semi-structured focus groups and interviews with the families and with the children, which were analyzed thematically. So again, our target was to achieve at least 75% positivity in terms of acceptability of randomization and enjoyment within the questionnaires. And as you can see, that was achieved, especially for the ultrasound. The one caveat is that about half of the families didn't wish to continue with articulation intervention, while all families who ended up being randomized to ultrasound were happy to continue with ultrasound. So overall, both interventions can be deemed as acceptable to families, and randomization was also acceptable to families in this study. And here you can see a summary of the analysis of focus groups and interviews. So these were analyzed thematically and then categorized using the theoretical framework of acceptability. And you can see the categories of the theoretical framework of acceptability on the left. They're again, as per our aims, there were more positive than negative themes identified within the ultrasound group. So I guess that was achieved, and families tended to have a good time and found use in the ultrasound intervention. The one negative theme that appeared in the ultrasound intervention also appeared in the articulation intervention group, which was the burden of travel and the childcare burden of for looking after siblings. And this came through quite strongly in both groups. As we know, articulation intervention could potentially be delivered online, and while the ultrasound is portable and could be brought closer to families, it would not be feasible to do online. So that's one of the downsides of ultrasound. There were otherwise very positive themes in both groups. So both groups enjoyed the intervention. They found it fun and helpful, although there was a little bit of a theme coming through that the articulation intervention, as usual, was a bit boring and repetitive sometimes. Children's confidence tended to improve in both groups, although there were a few people, a few voices in the articulation intervention who said that improvement wasn't really as much as they wanted. And in both groups, parents and children remarked about improvements in self-efficacy, and specifically for ultrasound, families found it really valuable to learn and understand how the movement of the tongue is related to speech sounds. And again, that's one of the unique benefits of ultrasound. Right, so here you can see a few quotes from the different groups. So this is in the articulation group coming through the message that travel is difficult, and the intervention could be a bit repetitive for some children. And also there was some really positive experiences as well in the articulation group. And in the ultrasound group, again, there was positivity of their experience, but again, the negative theme of having to travel to the hospital was really difficult for some families who had like a 4-hour round trip to the hospital. And again, you can see here that it came through across several responses that families thought that somehow the fact that the information, the biofeedback is displayed on a screen interested the child in a new way. And they were able to benefit from getting that feedback presented to them on screen, and that got them engaged a bit more for this therapy. So in terms of a summary for the qualitative results, randomization was acceptable to families, and both interventions tended to be acceptable and enjoyable, but there was the burden of travel. So even though the burden of completing additional measures was acceptable to them, the burden of travel was considerable both to the hospital and having to come to the university. So future studies should try to mitigate the burden of travel by thinking about additional locations where the research could be done and the intervention delivered. So the overall conclusion really is that the trial is feasible, even though recruitment was challenging. We hope that with COVID being further, and lockdown specifically being further behind us, that will improve for future research. Both interventions were acceptable and enjoyable to families. And hopefully the future research will be able to overcome both recruitment and travel challenges that people faced. So yeah, I would like to thank all the children and families who participated in this trial, and also the Chief Scientist Office of Scotland for funding it. Thank you very much for listening as well. And here you can scan the QR codes for the papers if you're interested in any of them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And can I just remind the audience that if you have questions for Maria, just post them into the question tab on the right-hand side. We will then, in a way, answer them as part of the live Q&A after the second talk. Okay. So then I just hand over to Midula Morali, who will give the second talk in this session.
All right, thank you so much. I will now hopefully successfully share my screen. Okay. I believe that has now come through. So thank you everyone for coming to the session, and I have the honor of presenting some work that I've been part of. So this is hopefully introducing the variability in child speech project, which is now over a 3-year undertaking. So this is an ESRC funded project that is hosted at the University of Strathclyde, but in collaboration with the University of Glasgow as well. And I am the research associate on the project, and here is the rest of our team. So we have Dr. Anya Cushman, who is the PI of the project. We have Joanne Cleland and Jane Stewart-Smith and David Young, who are co-Is. And along with me, I had Amy Smith and Lauren Taylor, who were PhD students as part of the project, who helped us along. So I will be introducing the project and its main aims. The idea behind the project was to study the development of speech in primary school-aged children in Scotland. And to the best of our knowledge, it is the largest child speech project that has been done in Scotland. Of course, we are all aware of developmental changes that children go through, as well as the kind of speech and language milestones that children acquire as they get older. And we do have some normative data sets. However, a lot of them are from research that is quite old at the moment, and also they've largely been conducted with monolingual English-speaking children. And so a part of the objective of the project was to have a more wide-ranging, encompassing data set that would reflect Scottish classrooms. And that means that we could aim to collect data regardless of language background, ethnic background, in order to get a more holistic view of what Scottish classrooms look like. So we aimed to answer how speech development looks like in typical Scottish primary school classrooms, as well as how much does speech performance vary in typically developing children. So as the title of the project states, we are very much interested in speech variability, as well as how variable these patterns are as children get older. And as I will describe ahead, one of the approaches of this project in order to look at this variability and its patterns was to look at measures across the various speech subsystems. And so we've really tried to target that here during this project. So as I said, the aims here were to describe variability in child speech development of primary school-aged children using a longitudinal perspective, as well as to establish typical ranges for acoustic measures that are associated with the various speech subsystems. So the data collection for this project began in May 2023, and we went to Scottish primary schools, and we collected data every 6 months over the course of roughly a year and a half, with the last data collection being completed in June of this year. So diving a bit deeper into how we targeted these various speech subsystems, as well as the kind of speech tasks that we had, this is just a screenshot that you are seeing of a bespoke app that we created for data collection. So we worked with an industry partner who's worked on speech language projects in the past. They helped us create an app so that we would have a more interactive way of collecting data in order to engage children to participate a bit more during the tasks. So as I mentioned, it's longitudinal, and we had 4 data collection sweeps, as we refer to them, across a year and a half. And we had 6 speech tasks that we collected, but prior to this, in order to incentivize parents to potentially be interested in participating and having their children participate in the project, we wanted to offer doing the deep screen as part of the data collection. So we collected deep data in the first data collection time point, which was then the results of which was then reviewed by speech and language therapists, and any children who were flagged, we were able to notify parents of the results, and if they chose, they could then take these to a referral for to a speech and language therapist if needed. So that was part of what we offered. And our speech tasks involved a story retell task. So this was the first task there that you see on the left-hand side, the left column, that's the treasure story. So this was a 2-minute long story about a boy and his dog going on an island trying to find treasure. So children were asked to listen to the story and then tell the story back in their own words. We also then had a picture description task, which involved a scene from a playground with various elements of the playground being visible, and children were asked to describe in as much detail as possible what they saw in the picture. We had a naming task. This involved 22 pictures, 2 of which were non-words. The other 20 were words, which were selected because A, they were highly imageable, and also they should have been comfortably be able to be identified by children ages 5 years or older. So children were asked to name the pictures that they saw, and we wanted to capture this data 3 times, hence it says 66 there. So children repeated the same pictures 3 times, and we randomized this and gave them breaks in between with different tasks so that they didn't get disinterested. We also had 6 sentences that we presented to children, and children were simply asked to listen to the sentence and repeat it back to us. And then we had some oromotor tasks. So we had a maximum performance tasks for sound prolongation, as well as a diadochokinesis DDK task. In the DDK task, they were asked to do 2 trials, and they were asked to produce not only the monosyllables, but also the trisyllabic sequence as well. So how many children did we collect data from? Where we went to 23 primary schools from 7 Scottish councils. These are the ones highlighted in blue on the map there. And we collected data from children ranging from ages 5 to 12 years. And this roughly corresponds to a Scottish primary school classroom. So this would be a P1 with children aged roughly between 5 to 6 years old. The Scottish class P3, so this would be roughly 7 to 8, and then P5 roughly 9 to 10. But of course, there's some overlap there, and some children were slightly older, depending on if any children were held back or taken forward in their class that year. So the same children were followed across all 4 different data collection type points as well. So this is what we found for sweep 1. We collected data from 275 children within that age bracket. And what we also did was we also collected data from published from the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. So basically, this is an indication of where the schools lie in terms of this index for multiple deprivation within Scotland. And so we also wanted to collect data that was hopefully more far-reaching and encompassing in terms of urban and rural areas, as well as differences in economic structures and things like that. However, obviously, this is not entirely representative because our data collection method was through opt-in rather than opt-out. So that meant that if schools chose to participate, then they were part of our data set. And from our data collection, we also found that when we did the deep task of the 200 and sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Of the 275 children, 45 children were flagged during the deep screen. Just to say that we only did the diagnostic screen here. We didn't go deeper and do the articulation test or anything like that. So these were the children who were flagged. That's about 16% of our data set. We did, however, find that children who were flagged only presented sort of very minor errors. So there wasn't anything glaring, but parents were informed of results. And this is a view of the data that we have collected across all 4 data collection sweeps. So as you can see, we have had some attrition over the 4 data collection time points, but we ended up with 210 children at the end of our last data collection, which resulted in about a 76% retention rate at the end of a year and a half. So we're pretty happy with that. Okay, so as I mentioned before, coming back to how we approach this speech subsystems approach of data collection. So we wanted to look at acoustic measures, as we mentioned, and that's where we want to build our normative data set from. And so we were trying to now extract from those speech tasks. This is a sample of the kinds of acoustic measures that we're interested in. So, for example, from the subsystem phonation, we are interested in F0 and maximum phonation time that we recorded through the sound prolongation task. Also interested in measures like jitter, shimmer, harmonic to noise ratio, and septal peak prominence. And from these measures, then we can also then derive a measure like the SZ ratio, which would reflect respiration and respiratory control. And then we also have measures like speech rate and articulation rate under articulation, etc. So some of these measures are what we are currently working with. So what are we doing with the data now that we've spent a year and a half collecting all of this data? We have tried to analyze some of this, and we have some areas that we are investigating. So we can obviously compare the child speech development of our typically developing population with that of disordered speech. We're also interested in looking at dialectal influences on classifying speech sound errors. We are also doing or have done acoustic analysis on voice of the children in our sample. We are also very interested in looking at variation in the Scottish R in child speech, as well as variability in DDK production. So this means not just variability in the DDK rate, for example, but we are also looking at variability in phonetic realizations in the way children produce the syllable sequences in DDK tasks. But we're also interested in the social variability in child speech and its impact of gender and age on this. So some of the outcomes that we have gotten from all of this is that we've recently published a paper that I first authored on looking at voice quality and its variability in performance in our data set. So this is based on the first data collection time point, so the first sweeps time data. So that has been published this year, and I'm currently working on a paper that will look at voice quality from the longitudinal perspective. So working on analyzing data from all 4 sweeps and looking at variation in voice quality in our data across all 4 time points. We've also presented data on our DTK task, so looking at accuracy as well as I said, variability in the phonetic realization of children's performance during this task, and we've recently presented this at a conference. And we've also published a conference proceeding at Interspeech this year in developing a semi-automatic pipeline for analyzing our speech data, which is now coming to use in analyzing some of our naming speech data. So more results forthcoming. So I wanted to take this opportunity to get some feedback from the group. So early, or rather at the end of last year, I had the opportunity to host a workshop with some speech and language therapists, some of whom may be in the audience today. I'm not sure if you are. Thank you very much for participating when you did. But we are currently preparing an online resource that can be used by speech and language therapists, but also other academics or students, for example, in the future, which will be published on our website. This part is not currently live, it's under development, but I'm giving a bit of a preview here today to get some feedback. The idea is to for us to take our data, our raw measures, and then be able to put that on the website to offer up ranges for various acoustic measures that may be of interest to various audiences. And this would essentially act as kind of a lookup facility where you would be able to, say, collect data, go on our website, and then put in your result and see where it stands in comparison to our normative data set that we have collected. So as you can see here, we are going to split this facility based on our speech subsystems approach. And then under each speech subsystem, we will have listed our various speech measures. So as you saw earlier from one of the previous slides, if you're looking at, say, phonation, you will have the various maximum phonation sort of for each sound. So we collected data for a, s, and z. And so you would be able to look these up. Or if you also had, say, if you're an academic and you're interested in jitter or shimmer or fundamental frequency, then you could look that up as well. And these would be listed under each speech subsystem. So I can show a bit of an example here because we have our voice quality measures published. So say you were to select maximum phonation for the A sound, you would then get a little box at the bottom, as you can see, and there you would be able to pick an age range. So that will come up in a little toggle there, as you can see. And so based on our sample data, instead of specifying individual ages, we have bracketed them in age ranges based on the number split that we have. So you could select an age range and then you could input the duration if you have recently collected data on speech phonation. And once you input that in, you can say compare, and you will get a little output box, which you can see on the right there, which will then immediately you will be able to see you'll either get a color green or amber or red. And basically how this is calculated is it's based on the average of our data within that specific age range. And then it will either come up with amber or red based on how many standard deviations away from that average your result is. So if it's within 1.5 standard deviations of the average, then you'll still get a green, and that would reflect that your result is roughly within an average performance of our data set for that specific age range. So in this result, you see an example of an age range of 6 years. So that's from the ages of 6 to 7. Say your input said 7 seconds, and then that shows that our sample data set had 30 participants who were within that age range. And based on that, there is that specific gender split. And the average performance was about 10.66 seconds. So your result falls within that average range, within that range. And so you get a green. If it was 1.5 standard deviations over or under, you would get an amber result. So you could do this essentially, we hope, for each of the measures on our lookup facility. And some of the feedback I would like here is if you have any sort of thoughts on the presentation of this data, whether this traffic light method system is clear and would be useful. We also are in developing sort of having a separate section of what does the result mean and or any further actions that you can take based on the result. So we are also developing text for that. But any other suggestions or feedback on the look or any other measures you might be interested in is very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Midula. How would you like to get that feedback? Obviously, we are now here moving on to the Q&A session. So how would you like, can people email you? How would you like to get the feedback you have been asking for?
People can absolutely email me. That's very, very welcome. But if anyone has any immediate thoughts, then feel free to put it in the Q&A and I can take notes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for two very interesting talks. We have a few questions in the Q&A. I think I can put some of them together because they are asking similar things. So let's start with Maria first. Maria, there are, I think, 2 or 3 questions around the cost of running ultrasound clinics, the cost of the ultrasound service, or the implications for funding and accessing ultrasound equipment. So it's really about basically questions around the costs of ultrasound and the service. Yeah.
Yeah. So the cost of ultrasound, of an ultrasound system is about £5,000. And the advantage of an ultrasound over an electropalatography approach is that it's a one-off cost. So once you have purchased the system, then you can use it for as many children, patients as you need to, while electropalatography, as probably the audience knows, requires a custom palate developed for each child, and that only fits for a limited time. So in that sense, relatively, it is more cost effective. And then whether that's within the budget of different teams, that's a different question, also relative to the scale of the NHS. Something else that you have to keep in mind is that there might be certain permissions that have to be obtained in order to use ultrasound within the NHS, if that's the question. So if you're interested in, if you have further questions about that, or you're interested in purchasing ultrasound equipment, I would suggest you contact Joanne Cleland, who is the PI on the project, because she has a better overview of what the issues might be and how the process could work better for people.
Thank you, Maria. Mirjota, when do you anticipate the the website and the resources to be live?
Okay,
is one of the questions.
tough question. So we are still doing data analysis. I think one of the advantages we have is that we have such a large data set. The disadvantage is that we don't have the manpower to analyze things as fast as we would hope. So as I mentioned, we have all the voice data that we have fed into that lookup facility. So those measures are not live on the website, but we are using it to beta test that part of the website. So that means that when the website becomes live, those measures will be available immediately. We are currently also trying to get the results of our DDK data out. So that is underway and hopefully will be done early next year. And so what we would do potentially is have that area of the website go live and then populate the measures as we do the data analysis. So we might have the facility go live and some measures will be available and others will then come as and when we get the analysis done. So I can say that hopefully sometime next year this will be available and the voice measures will be available straight away. And then hopefully also the DDK measures and other measures will then be populated as we analyze them.
Thank you. Back to Maria, there are two questions about intelligibility, which are, I think, related if I find them now. So aside from parental reports, was intelligibility measured through standardized assessment after the intervention? And another one related to intelligibility was that I understand that it was a feasibility trial, but were there any findings to discuss for speech intelligibility? So basically, was it measured and what did you find?
Yes, great question. So intelligibility was only measured using the ICS, so parental report. We also measured percentage consonants correct as our primary outcome measure. I know that's not intelligibility, but it's the, I guess, more quantitative way in which we looked at what happened with children's speech. And there were trends for improvement in intelligibility in both groups. In terms of which group improved more than the other. So we had responders and non-responders in both groups. Overall, there were more responders in the articulatory group than the ultrasound group. But we also had very few participants. So we will still be hoping to run a full trial to properly investigate this with a well-powered study. So this study was did not have enough power to properly test efficacy. So definitely there were children who were good responders in both groups. The other caveat to seeing outcomes and looking at effectiveness is that children had only 6 sessions of intervention, which is not enough. So many children were having progress, so they were producing front articulations. So for example, if they had backing, they were producing front articulations and they were saying sounds like th instead of t, which would not count as correct using PCC, so percentage consonants correct. An interdental fricative wouldn't count, but it is definitely moving in the right direction. So at the end of session 6, they should ideally have had further intervention. And this is what we're going to change. So we're currently preparing to apply for a full trial. And in the full trial, children will have 15 sessions. So they'll actually have a chance to properly improve and properly reflect percentage within the more conservative measure of progress, which is percentage consonant correct, whether they actually benefit from either of these treatments.
Thanks. Let's have a look. We have a few minutes left. So Medulla, there's a bit of feedback. So I leave those questions. You can have a look at them. Okay. But one question as part of the feedback is also, can we naturally assume that your norms will generalize to an English population?
Well, I wouldn't say so. That just being the case that our data set may not how should I say it, overlap. And what I mean by that is, as I said earlier in the talk, simply because we are collecting data or we have collected data from children of different language backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, whereas other data from across the UK, for example, previously published data sets may and are usually with monolingual English-speaking children. Now, of course, this might not and should not, in theory, affect oral motor speech tasks. So for example, the DDK task and the sound prolongation task should not be impacted by this. However, other speech tasks will be. So not all measures will be comparable. What we are planning on doing is, as part of the facility, is, as I said, we are developing that little text box, which we haven't developed yet, where we have sort of a further action sort of section where, depending on your result, we will have a potentially next steps of what does the result mean and what are potential next steps. And so in the what does the results mean, we could have a section of this is how our result compares to previously published data, as in a little short summary of is it comparable, is it outside of the range of, etc. And so that will give you a bit more insight into what the result means within the wider UK context.
Great, thank you. I think this also answers another question which was related to how comparable the population data set is to other areas in the UK, and because that might affect how meaningful the color-coded results are. So in a way, you answered that question as well. So thanks for that. Then back to Maria. Hopefully, I think a rather quick one. Why was the DEEP only carried out at baseline?
So the DEEP was carried out in order for me to see how children are producing what their consonants are in the whole consonant system, and identify which consonants would be eligible for treatment and which ones should be targeted for their treatment. So it's not really part of the outcome measures, just to get an impression of how children are producing their consonants and select a target.
Thanks for clarifying that. And Medulla, how objective is the measurement?
Well, I suppose it depends on what the measure is, but how objective it is there are advantages and disadvantages to acoustic measures. I think some of these have some value to, say, speech and language therapists, because some of these are measures that you might be working with more regularly. So these might be tasks like a DDK task, which might be conducted in clinic, as well as a sound prolongation task. Others may be less relevant to you, such as jitter and shimmer, etc. Their objectivity is based on previous literature. So we know that measures like CPP and jitter and shimmer do have evidence that shows us that it demonstrates voice quality in speech. And there's a reason why we've chosen to not only use, say, jitter, shimmer, and HNR, but also CPP. So CPP is considered a more robust representation of voice quality because it doesn't rely on fundamental frequency to derive the outcome measure. So we have this variability there that has some evidence backing in terms of what it demonstrates.
Great, thank you. And I think we have maybe it's time for one last question, and it's for Maria. So apologies if you said this, but what were the take-home or home practice tasks for each group, please? Was there any compliance data collected on this?
So there was no home practice specified within the trial. I think because most families, this was not their first engagement with speech therapy. So the children were aged between 4.5 and 16. So for most of them, they've already had another round of speech therapy before. So they were used to the idea of doing some practice at home, but that was spontaneously decided by them. It's not something we were measuring or controlled. So some children, perhaps their parents were a bit more, had extra initiative and prompted them to practice, or the children practiced at home, but it was not specified by the trial.
Thank you so much. We are approaching the end of the time for this session, so I know there are a few questions left in the Q&A. As far as I know, I think they stay available after the end of the session, and I'm not sure if we can, if you can maybe answer them afterwards or so. They're definitely not lost. And also, all the ones that I clicked into answer question, they will still be available. So Midula, you can still see the feedback that often came before the actual question. Okay. So what's left for me to say is thank you for coming to this session, and thanks for both our great speakers, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you.